Hi listeners, Jason here. We're on the countdown to PHSCon in Sydney on 19th and 20th of June this year. It is the community event of the year for those in HR and safety who are progressing evidence-based practice for workplace mental health. Whether you're responsible for compliance to psychosocial safety regulations or driving your respective work strategy, PHSCon is the place to be. The speaker lineup is unparalleled, with global thought leaders such as Adam Grant and Professor Rob Reiner participating. There's 8 international speakers presenting in person, 6 industry case studies from small to large organisations, and even a full 45-minute comedy set from Jimmy Reese to lead us into networking drinks. Now, if that's not enough, get hands-on learning from a choice of 4 pre-conference masterclasses facilitated by experts from Australia, the UK, and Canada. This will be the largest gathering ever on the topic in Australia, so get your bums along, make a few new friends, and soak in the latest thinking and application of psychosocial safety. Find out more at www.phscon.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Van Schie, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
Yeah, a bit flustered.
Why is that?
Well, why is that? Because it's later in the afternoon. I had planned to record this at home, and then I got home and found that the people who are demolitioning our courtyard in our apartment complex had not planned to finish at 3:30 like they have done every other day this week, but intended to carry on until 5 o'clock. So I thought that a background of jackhammering was probably not conducive to a good podcast recording. So I got in my car and did my best with the peak hour traffic to get back to the office.
Yeah, and I think that's a wise move. I do feel sorry for Mira, who's just finding out now that we're recording in the studio and not the other format that we were going to do.
After she had to reorganize cameras and whatever else. Yeah. I'm sorry, Mira.
And now she's worked it out. We didn't record at home.
Indeed. Surprise.
Surprise, Mira. But we get to record in the beautiful studio and we get to welcome a guest from all on the other side of the world.
Yes.
I can't talk. It's at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We're recording 3 episodes this week. The
are.
person that's recording with us today, she's in luck because it's the first one of the 3 this week. So
does that mean that she's in luck, or she has to deal with our rustiness because it's been a little while?
It is. Yeah, it's been a few weeks since our last podcast recording. So rusty, but also maybe more enthusiastic than after our 3rd one.
I don't know. I'm a bit tired and sweaty, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
I know my hair's annoying you as well. So who knows?
Oh, well, I can't see it with the headphones on.
Headphones are on.
Yeah. Yeah, Joelle's looking like a bit of a hippie. She's really growing that hair out. So
we'll do our best, Jason.
Yeah. With your hair?
No, with our podcast recording today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try and take that energy into our hair as well. So that would be great.
I mean, my hair will just grow at the pace that it grows at. My attitude towards it doesn't really impact it.
Okay. All right. Look, I think our guest has waited long enough.
Yeah.
I think she should come in. And we have rescheduled on this guest a few times as well because of illnesses and all the rest.
We better be extra delightful today, Jason.
We are always delightful.
No, I said extra delightful.
No, but can we get any more extra than what we are?
I mean, not more extra probably, but maybe more delightful.
Okay. All right. This person is a chartered psychologist with experience in clinical and forensic patient work, along with developing research and strategy in occupational contexts. She is the Principal Health and Wellbeing Specialist at the Rail Safety and Standards Board in Great Britain. Welcome to the podcast, Joana Faustino.
Hello, thank you. And very glad you survived, Joelle, today, hair included and everything. And yeah, as you were talking, made me think I'm Portuguese, so my accent might actually mean I might, say words that may or may not exist. We'll see. So Jason, I feel very at home now.
Thank you. And it's nice to have someone who's truly bilingual on the, did I say that right? Bilingual?
You did.
Okay, cool.
That's also an English word.
Yes.
Well done.
Got it. I know my England. Really great to have you on, Joanna. I'm really looking forward to discussing some of your great research with the listeners today.
Thank you. Very exciting to be here.
First of all, what podcast do you like to listen to?
So I think, unlike or like other guests you have had in this podcast, I'm not a huge podcast fan. So work related, this is definitely my favorite podcast. So the Psych Health and Safety. Then not work related, there's one I really like, and I recommend if you're a curious person. So I don't know if you know Ologies. It's a podcast about all things science, so from burnout to a specific type of butterflies. They cover everything science related, and it is really interesting. So if you're quite curious and you like to learn about different things, that's really good. And then if we have, by any chance, any Portuguese speaking people here today, two of my other favorite podcasts are Vamos Todos Morrer, which is basically a podcast where it is quite funny because they take the anniversary of someone's death, someone who is famous, and then they use that to talk about what that person has achieved or what they have inspired. So they might be talking about philosophers, scientists, actors, with quite a lot of humor. So it's a bit historic, a bit comedy. It's awesome. And then there's another one which is called Platitude, and it's basically around like they call it platitudes, but it's more like philosophical and around like different themes of society, like what is beautiful, what does self-conscious mean, variety of different things. So, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not the biggest podcast person, but there are a few I do really like.
Yeah, good. Some new ones there that we haven't heard of before.
But she likes our podcast.
Yes, I heard that, Jason. Yes.
It's
Tick.
great. Yeah, tick.
Gold star for Joanna.
Which makes it extra special, isn't it? Because since I'm not a big podcast person, I think it's extra special.
Discerning listener. Yep. Tell us about your professional career, please.
So as Jason said, I'm a psychologist. I started my career in a prison, and although I trained as clinical and forensic psychologist, one thing that was quite interesting was when I started working, so in this case in a prison, I became quite interested in with the impact the workplace might have on people. So I remember when I started, I was meant to be working with people who were in prison, but I was really curious about working with guards and understanding the impact of working in a prison and the impact of the dynamics with people who were actually in prison. But I remember my supervisor at the time said, well, it is a bit difficult. You cannot really work with inmates and work with guards at the same time. The dynamics don't really work. So I ended up like dropping that idea. And then after working there for a while, I moved into a community mental health service where I had the chance to work with children, adolescents, adults, and then some people who were in care, so above 70, which was really, really interesting and varied. And then I had a private practice for a while where I saw, again, a variety of different patients and offered psychotherapy. And then I moved to the UK, went back into forensic services, so worked with the National Probation Service. And it was there that I really had the chance for the first time to put together the clinical side and forensic side and the more occupational side. So at the time, I remember I worked with loads of probation officers, and I kept seeing the same issues. So they all experience very similar things. So really high workloads, hugely stressful environments. The management of risk within the National Probation Service is something that is quite sensitive and it was quite impactful on them. So I was speaking to these probation officers, seeing they were all experiencing similar things, but noticed they had no space to actually come together, talk about these things, reflect on their practice. So at the time, I suggested that we created a reflective practice space for them. And it was awesome for me, the experience, but also for them and to see them finding peers that were experiencing the same things, being able to talk about the issues they were having, being able to find solutions together. So that's when I started navigating a bit more the occupational setting within my workplace. And then I moved to rail, which has nothing to do with all the rest I have done. And when I came to the rail industry, to RSSB, I came to deliver, it was basically a psychologically informed project where we were meant to, or I was meant to work with rail employees, their managers, and we offered consultancy and training for line managers, but also employees who are struggling at work in light of their mental health. So it has been a hugely varied career so far. I remember once speaking to someone and they were talking about how sometimes your career is like A to B to C, and mine is sort of like, oh, you go up and you go down. It's a sandwich between clinical and forensic services, and then an occupational setting. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, good. I do love a bit of a scribbly career path.
Yeah. No one wants linear.
Boring.
I know. Yeah.
So tell us, you're at the RSSB, obviously working in rail. So tell us about the workplace mental health work that RSSB does within the UK.
Yeah, so I might just start by explaining in case people don't know what RSSB is. So basically RSSB is an independent safety standards and research body for Great Britain's rail. And basically what we try to do is provide the rail industry with the knowledge, the skills, the standards to operate in a way that is safer, more sustainable and healthier as well. And then in that context, I lead work on mental health. So typically our work with the rail industry, and that includes work in the context of mental health, includes industry groups where we bring together different stakeholders to discuss the biggest issues in different topics. It includes research, which I'll touch on in a bit. It also includes developing strategy with members, some consultancy work, some training. And then specifically thinking about mental health, I think an example of what I'm talking about is something that, which probably underpins most of the work we do in mental health at the moment, is something that has been developed together with Southeastern, which is the Rail Mental Health Charter. So this is a framework that has been developed for rail organizations with a few actions to help them identify priority areas and help them develop a strategic approach to the management of mental health, not just the management, but also prevention of poor mental health and promotion of good mental health in the workplace. And then in that context, we have developed a variety of work. So specifically in the context of trauma, which is quite prevalent in the rail industry. And there's a variety of things we offer the industry in that context. But the Rail Mental Health Charter is almost like the Bible of mental health for the rail industry, with then like specific resources to support people in different areas.
Now, for those outside of the UK and not really aware of the scale that you work at, how many people are employed in the rail industry in the UK?
So estimations vary, but it might be 250,000. So it is quite a lot of people, especially for a country the size of the UK. So it is a lot. And we have, of course, train operating companies, which would be the ones that take passengers. We have, of course, freight. We have then a whole supply chain and infrastructure management. So there are thousands of different rail companies in the UK that are RSSB's members, and we work with.
Yeah, no, it's very significant. I remember seeing the charter and looking at all the logos that have signed up to that. And there's, like you say, there's heaps of rail companies within the UK. So you've still got a few to go to get all of them on the charter.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, to be honest, when we launched the charter with Southeastern, so basically for context, Southeastern approached us because they wanted to build something specific for the rail industry. And so they came to us and then we worked together on developing it. The first year of the charter, we had more than 100 companies sign. But one of the things we realized was in many cases, companies were quite excited to sign, and the more signed, the more wanted to sign. But that didn't really initially translate into a lot of change, into a lot of work being done. It was a bit of a tick box. It was like, okay, everyone is signing, let's all sign, awesome, let's have our logo here. And throughout the years, we have changed the charter to make sure that it is a real commitment. So if companies are signing, we do expect that they are signing to actually address the issues in the organization. and recognizing that every company will be at a different point of their journey. Some might be quite mature, some might be starting to think about mental health. Regardless of that, we want to ensure everyone is moving in the right direction. So so we have put some measures in place to make sure we're supporting companies, and it's not just a tick box exercise. As much as we want to have like loads and all the logos one day, we do want it to make a difference and to support organizations, and not just to be something that sits on a shelf.
Yes, I guess what sort of activities do you want to see them doing? Like you say, the different organisations that have signed up to that are at different levels of maturity. So if they're signing up to the charter now, what do you expect of them?
So basically, signing up to the charter means it means a commitment to improving mental health in the organization. So that's the commitment. And then there are 5 actions to the charter. So one of them is around having senior leadership commitment and including employees in all activities, so employee consultation. Then there's a big one around understanding your organization, so getting the data that tells you what is actually going on, so not making decisions just for the sake of it, but actually making informed, data-driven decisions. Addressing stigma as well is quite a big one, especially in the rail industry, where we have middle-aged male workforce, which for whom talking about mental health can be seen as too sensitive or too fluffy in many situations. But then also we want them to, once they do understand their organization, we want them to focus on how they can provide a healthy workplace. So we want them to take that data and have proper strategic plans on how they're going to address the biggest risks that have been identified. And then also to focus on more on the reactive side, which is providing support, ensuring that whoever struggles has access to support that is valuable to them. So again, some organizations might still be trying to get senior leadership to commit to improving mental health. Others might already understand quite a lot about the organization. So they might have already, for example, assessed psychosocial risks, and therefore they might be at another stage in their journey. What we really want them is to understand the overall picture, so that all of these things are needed in order to actually improve mental health. And then understand where you are, what resources do you have, and start planning for how they're going to address it. So now one of the things we ask our members, our charter members, is for a yearly follow-up. So every year we want to understand what they're doing, what has improved. And again, it doesn't need necessarily to be something huge, because we understand resource constraints and again, different companies are in different places. But we want to understand where they are, where they were, what are their plans for the next 12 months, and then we can help them in light of their constraints and in light of their objectives, get them to where they want to get to.
Yeah, terrific. So do you see any actions then, or ask them for evidence of what they've done in this space?
Yeah, so there are a few. So we have, for example, one of our members did a couple of years ago a psychosocial risk assessment, which was, I think, so far in the rail industry we don't have many companies actually focusing too much on that. It's still quite new. So they did that in the context of the charter, and really helped them think about what that should include. What has been quite interesting is, although they have done that, 2 years in, they're still struggling with the providing a healthy workplace part. So they have the data, but then taking that and doing something with it that responds to those issues has been a bit more problematic for them. For some organizations, it might be something as simple as, for example, many of our members have peer support programs, mental health first aid, trauma risk management, health and wellbeing champions, but not many actually measure the impact of that. Not many are collecting data even on that. Not many are thinking about who actually do we want the mental health first aiders to be, or what do we actually want them to do, or even the purpose of that. So for some organizations that are quite focused more on the providing support part, a lot of the work has been helping them to, if they want to have peer support programs, to be more structured, to ensure, for example, there is supervision for these peer supporters, to ensure they really have clear objectives for these roles. So that it has been quite interesting to see in the almost 4 years of the in the 4 years of the charter, to see how I think people or our charter members are becoming more structured with their approaches. It is a slow burner, but this idea of sometimes doing a lot but achieving very little, I think to a certain extent in the context of health and well-being, it's not uncommon that initiatives are thrown but without much like thought behind them. I think we are moving slowly into getting charter members more focused on doing things that actually add value, monitoring the impact of things. And then, as I was saying, for some at a small scale, so it might be you measure the impacts of your awareness raising session, which is something that is quite small. For others, it might be actually, measuring things on a different scale. So I would say, becoming more structured is probably overall something that we're noticing in charter members.
Yeah, good evidence-based practice. Like if you're going to do a mental health intervention, you probably should apply that scientist practitioner mindset. So, yeah, nice.
So, you've recently published a report that summarised the RSSB's Mental Wellbeing in Rail Achieving Change project, which is what we're here to talk to you about mostly today. So can you tell us what was the purpose of the project and how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we in 2020, I say we, but it was actually my colleague Michelle O'Sullivan who was with us at the time who led on it. We did the first ever mental health survey in the rail industry. So we knew that, anecdotally, let's put it like that, we might have an industry that is more exposed to a variety of hazards, such as work-related violence, fatalities on the line, ongoing and prolonged stress, bullying, etc. But we didn't really have the data, so no one was collecting that data. Companies had data on sickness absence, but that didn't really cut it. So we did the first rail industry mental health survey. Then on the back of that, a few things emerged. One of them was that more than 1 in 3 of the employees surveyed actually met criteria for a mental health condition, which is a lot. So by mental health condition, in this case, which we were assessing was anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. So 1 in 3 of everyone that responded, which were around 4,000 people, met criteria for one of these, or in some cases more than one. Then we also understood in this survey, when looking at the data, that actually staff were 6 times more likely to be absent due to a health problem caused by work than a workplace accident. And in an industry that is quite focused with safety, that was quite a big thing. And then in addition to the overall report on the survey that we provided to the industry, we were also able to provide individual reports to companies that had enough respondents. And what Michelle and I thought at the time was, we have all of this data, companies now have their individual data from the survey, but they might not necessarily be doing a lot with it. So we really wanted to make sure we could utilize it. We could utilize that data for something. So we came up with the idea to work with 3 companies in the rail industry that had an individual report from the mental health survey and basically help them, I think in a nutshell, help them develop a structured evidence-based approach to mental health management. So what we really wanted at the time was, one was use company data, including data from our mental health survey, but then any other surveys they might have. We wanted also to shadow workers in different roles to understand what the jobs looked like. So we really wanted to use that data to do something, and then we wanted to support companies to invest in evidence-based or evidence-informed initiatives. So again, not just like throwing a variety of different things to try and improve mental health, but actually being quite structured with their approach. And then finally, we wanted to help them to measure outcomes. So we wanted to, these were the 3 main objectives: data-driven, using data-driven insights, having evidence-based or evidence-informed, at least, approaches that respond to what the data was really telling us in terms of the biggest issues, and then measuring the outcomes. So this was what we tried to do. One thing I didn't mention was that in the mental health survey, we also understood that, and this is for someone who works in rail, and I've been in the rail industry for 6 years, that's probably is going to ring a bell. There are many challenging situations in the rail industry, but there's also something that has been quite interesting to understand, which is quite a strong sense of community. So we wanted within this project to also leverage that to increase support and understand to what extent we could make sure companies were supporting people in the appropriate way.
Very robust process there. Test, intervene, reassess.
Not groundbreaking, isn't it? Yeah, it's not groundbreaking, but we came to realize that it was a bit more complicated than what it looked on paper when we tried to do it. So yeah.
Of course, yeah. There's always all of the complexities and difficulties that go into running a robust process like that.
Yeah, even though it's not groundbreaking, it's not common.
Yeah.
People just love doing the solution bit. They don't like doing the the measurement up front.
Yeah, and I think on that, one thing that was quite interesting, and I can talk a bit more about that in a bit, but one thing that was quite interesting was we realized when we went through the project with the 3 companies we identified, we selected, we understood it was the process was really difficult for them. So the initial bit around the assessment, let's look at your data, let's do the shadowing, let's then bring the results back to you, let's have a discussion without jumping into solutions, was, I think, excruciating for the 3 companies and the people we're working with. And I remember we kept having to say, no, but now it's just time to look at, do you feel this reflects your organization? Is there anything we haven't picked up on? Is there any other data that we should be looking at? Is there anything that is missing here? And they kept on jumping to, what we need to do is, no, but we're not there yet. And it was, I think, even for the team in the project, which was myself, my colleague Faye, and Julia, who at the time was doing a placement with us, we had to keep the 3 of us in check, that at some point we felt ourselves feeling rushed into moving into the next stage. So it was actually quite good to have a team of 3 throughout, for part of the project at least, because we could calm ourselves down and remind ourselves, okay, there is a reason why we're doing it in this way. Even if they're struggling, there is a reason, because you can easily conform to what is happening and just be like, okay, let's move into the solution, even if you haven't fully understood the problem. So that was quite interesting to understand in practice.
So tell us then about the methodology that you deployed for this particular project.
Yeah. So we wanted, one of the things we wanted from the beginning was to make sure the project used a participatory approach, because we wanted to support companies, handhold them through the process, but we wanted them, when we left, we wanted them to have gained skills, and we wanted them to be able to replicate at least part of the things we were doing. So we didn't want to do something to them and then say, okay, off we go. We really wanted to make sure they were involved any step of the way, to make sure employees at different levels felt involved and had the ability to take part, to comment, to influence results. And then we also used the module of occupational health interventions that was developed by Professor Karina Nielsen and colleagues, as well as some guidance from Public Health England. But basically, we started by selecting 3 real organizations that had individual reports from the mental health survey, as I mentioned, 1 train operating company, 1 freight operating company, and 1 supplier. So we wanted to cover different parts of the industry. And because we knew that, of course, a sample of 3 is not great, we wanted at least to ensure that we were spreading in within the rail industry and the different challenges that different parts of the industry might go through. And then basically what we did was we got in contact with the companies that we identified as being good candidates. And then there were a few prerequisites. So we asked them that they appointed project leads. So we wanted someone who would lead on their side. We asked them to commit to collecting data. So although we were going to support, they were responsible for collecting the data and for giving us the data initially for the initial assessment. We also asked them to create a steering group for the project to, again, ensure different people, different levels in the organization were involved. We asked them to have whether they would have resources to execute whatever plan we came up with, but with the knowledge that, again, different organizations may have different resources. So we always told them, we will work with you, but you need to have at least minimal resources to be able to get involved in the process, and also senior leadership commitment and buy-in for the actual process. And then in terms of of how the research was conducted or how we work with them, so we had some stages, 6 stages. So the first one was the engagement. So setting the scene, helping them understand what we wanted to do, understand on their side what they wanted to get out of the project in terms of very specific objectives they might have or things they felt they were struggling with. Doing the assessment bit, which was around, again, looking at mental health survey data, any internal data they had on sickness absence, on engagement, so any data they had access to, and then some shadowing that we did within some roles in these organizations. Then we went into the formulation stage where we started looking at, okay, what did our assessment say, and then what do we want to do with it? Then the planning, so what are the initiatives that we're going to put in place? If all of these are our issues and if all of these are the things that are working quite well, what are the initiatives that we can put in place? And then implementing those initiatives and monitoring impact. So these were the stages we went through. What I can say is that these were the stages in theory. In practice, there was a lot of back and forth at some point, especially with, I mentioned that when we were doing the assessment, companies wanted to jump into the solution. What was quite interesting to understand was when we were starting to look at solutions, they were wanting to go back to the assessment, which was very interesting. So it was almost like, oh, no, but is this correct? Is this initial assessment correct? And we had to really, again, hold them to reflect on, well, unless, of course, anything had changed that we needed to reassess. That was the assessment they signed up to and they said yes to, and they almost like put a stamp on saying, yes, this sounds good. So we cannot always go back to reassessing unless, again, we do have reasons for that. And what we realized was that when the planning phase started, it was quite heavy, and we can touch on that in a bit, but to a certain extent, we understood there was a bit of lack of maybe capability in these 3 organizations where the professionals that we were working with maybe didn't feel as confident in their health and well-being knowledge. And therefore, when we started planning, they got a bit anxious about it, which was interesting in itself. So this, sorry, I think maybe I went into too much detail, but this was sort of, how we went through it.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode. No, it's a really interesting observation that I think a lot of people don't understand. They try and plan, I think, too much and try and get the perfect plan, and then they try and execute it. But like you found in the real world, then you have to kind of like change the plan as you go. So yeah, I think some people use that maybe as a procrastination technique, spend all their time planning rather than doing. Whereas sometimes it's a good idea just to get into it and kind of learn as you go.
Yeah, Jason, I think absolutely. We did, that was our hypothesis, that there was some procrastination going on in there where, because again, they didn't have the resources, maybe they didn't feel they had the capability for doing certain things. When it got real to, okay, now it's time to do something with it, it was really hard. And we had to come at some point, because this was a project that was meant initially to last for 2 years. We ended up extending it. But even with that, there were many things that we didn't get to. And there was a point in time when we had to tell organizations, okay, these were the things we planned to do. Choose one, just do one. Let's just go ahead with one. And then, and they were quite different, because that was literally, time would go by and we saw, and again, we were supporting, but they were the ones that were meant to implement it. And we kept seeing that it wasn't really happening. There were many things delaying it, which I think, in part might have been, okay, this is now getting too real. So it became difficult.
Yeah, but you've identified something that we see quite commonly, which is obviously the lack of internal capability or confidence, and then also the lack of capacity, right? People have their day jobs, they've got business as usual, and it's hard to do something in addition unless there's the additional resourcing available to go with that, right? And even in Australia, where we have regulations that are dictating to companies, you must do this. There's like no ifs or buts. Often it's still not resourced, and it's these poor HR and health and safety practitioners that are going to try and do it without any extra headcount, and it just doesn't get done well. So you're just finding what we see very commonly.
Yeah, and I think on that note, something that might be interesting to say is that out of the 3 companies we worked with, only one had a health and well-being, formal health and well-being professional. So for 2 of these organizations, we had really passionate people who were driving the mental health agenda on top of their day job. So even their titles were not health and well-being. So one, for example, work in HR, the other one worked in safety. And it was really interesting to understand that actually the organization that had, interesting, it's probably not surprising for anyone, but the company that actually had the health and well-being professional was the one that was able to achieve a lot more than the others. Exactly because of that, people were moving the project along their weekends, at night, which it goes against, we're trying to improve mental health, but then the people that are trying to do it are put in positions that are quite detrimental to their health and well-being, potentially, especially because they're sustained through time. So it was really interesting to understand the realities of it. And as you were saying, sometimes when you picture a piece of research, you pictured it almost like in an artificial environment, as this is what is ideal. But then in practice, there's loads of things that go wrong and loads of things that don't work, and you need to readapt, which again was quite interesting for us. So in addition to it being a research piece to understand how to do it, for us at RSSB, it also included, it was the first time we had tried to do something like this. So there was loads of learning for us in terms of how we work with our members, the expectations we might have on them, what might be possible or not possible for them, which were really, really interesting to get to as well.
I just find it a little bit funny that they were wanting to get straight to solutions initially, and then when you finally got to solutions, they changed their mind a little bit.
They just got gun shy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were the benefits that those participating organizations received?
So a few benefits that companies reported. One of them was actually having, the way they put it was having RSSB support in terms of like the weight it added. So for some of these organizations, they were trying to do things, but because they were doing them internally, it didn't feel sometimes they were heard. And then by having RSSB, and because of the role we have in the industry, it felt like even senior leaders would get more interested in getting, in moving things along. So that in itself was quite interesting for us to understand. It wasn't something that we saw coming. But then also what they reported was that it helped them rethink their approach to the management of mental health. So in the beginning of the process, we identified key objectives for each organization. And then at the end of the 2 years, we actually asked them, where did you think you got to in terms of your objectives? And it varied massively. So between 40% of what they wanted to achieve. So for one organization, they felt they only achieved 40% of what they signed up to. For another one, it was 80%. And then the third one, I think it was around 50% or something like that. So still, they didn't really fully achieve what they wanted, which was really interesting to understand. And then we tried to understand with them, why was it that they didn't achieve what they wanted? And again, unsurprisingly, what we already touched on, not having dedicated health and well-being specialists in the organization. So the company that actually said they achieved 80% of their goals was the company that had a health and well-being professional. Limited time and resources, absence of strategy. So we did, as part of the project, we did work with them on developing strategy. But again, the reality of then embedding that strategy realistically in an organization was a bit more difficult. So it felt like it sat a bit on a silo instead of it being, okay, this is what it means for the organization as a whole. Lack of support from leadership were also mentioned, and in some organizations they felt there was not enough involvement from staff. What was really interesting to understand for us was all three organizations improved in the three objectives we had in the beginning. So use of company data to improve problem solving, investing in good practice, and also measuring impact. What surprised us was that when we picture this piece of research, in my mind, I imagine all sorts of amazing outcomes, and really big things. We didn't get to that. So although everyone improved, it was at a quite a small scale. So for example, in terms of using company data before problem solving, one of the organizations, as we went through their process, felt that actually, because we had done the mental health survey in 2020, they felt that a lot had changed internally. So they felt they needed actually more data. So we needed to redo a survey because they wanted to understand where they were, which to a certain extent we can say, okay, yeah, we already did the assessment, now you're doing it again. But they had actually quite a strong rationale. They have had quite a lot of change, and they wanted to understand where things were 2 years in. So, and this was because of the recognition that without having proper data, it's quite hard to make decisions. So they did want to repeat the survey, focusing on specific things that were problematic for them. For another organization, for example, they were doing a lot of sessions in terms of mental health awareness. For the first time, they actually measured pre and post. Very simple, but they measured knowledge pre and post, which was something that for us, again, at RSSB, we didn't feel that was not what we wanted necessarily. But in the end, that did represent a change to the way in which they were approaching like mental health awareness. For another organization, it was really about the understanding that they needed to bring different people in from the business to make sure mental health was truly embedded. So what they did was they actually created almost like leads in different departments to come together to look at issues in each of their departments, collect data needed to make it more of a sustainable process. So what they got out of it was quite varied. And although all of them, again, as I said, reported improvements in the 3 project objectives, some of these were, in the grand scheme of things, were small improvements. What we on our side reflected on was that due to the nature of organizational change, it is sometimes suggested that like evaluating things at a micro level might make sense, especially when we're looking at like evaluating things immediately after you deliver, for example, an intervention. So in our case, we didn't feel that the macro outcomes were really realized, but smaller changes were identified, such as the ones I've touched on, but then more specifically thinking about people having access to senior leadership meetings, so having a health and wellbeing professional actually have a standing slot in one of those meetings, employees becoming more aware of support that was available to them, in things as simple as creating feedback forms to collect feedback from initiatives were some examples of things that ended up coming out. Very different to what we dreamt of initially, but still, I think, still quite valuable for companies in terms of how they approach the management of mental health, really.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some stuff in there around for a lot of organizations, it is about starting with some very basic, what might seem like really simple interventions. But yeah, like that, having the safety function have a direct reporting line to senior management is such a significant change to be making, in terms of governance, in terms of line of sight to risk control. So I think, the knock-on impacts of that one change to the business would actually be very, very significant. So it sounds like a small change, but it's a really substantial change in terms of what are the implications of that change.
Yeah, true. And I think again, some of these changes probably we did expect too much for a 2-year project. And also because we had never done this when it came to health and well-being, of really like hand holding and really spending time with companies, this amount of time with companies, we didn't fully understand. We understood some of the barriers, but we didn't fully understand all of them. So even what I was talking about in terms of capability, one of the things we understood as we were working with them was that this process of assessing, putting a plan in place, monitoring, was not something they were used to when it came to health and well-being. It's something that they might be used to sometimes when it comes to safety, but not health and well-being, which is a bit like mind-blowing, because why would you not use the same process? So that in itself was really interesting. We didn't think this would be a thing. It's quite a straightforward process, nothing groundbreaking. But for companies to start thinking about like that, or for the participating companies to actually start thinking about the importance of data. And I think specifically one thing we identified when we did then the review with them at the end was they were the way in which they were approaching things, or the questions they were asking, or even the initiatives they were putting in place were changing quite a lot. So what they were trying to do at some point was, okay, if, let's say we're going to do something small, but let's do it well. So if, again, it's awareness raising, which is probably one of the most basic things, but let's do it well. Let's really make sure that if we do a webinar on topic X, we at least ask people about, for example, their knowledge before and after, if our objective is to just increase knowledge. If we're going to have peer supporters, then let's make sure that we recruit them properly. Let's make sure we're helping them collect some data. Let's make sure we're finding ways of collecting feedback from people that use it. So I think that this of doing maybe in some situations less, but doing it well and doing it with a clear purpose was probably the biggest outcome of the project, more than all the hundreds of things that we thought we were going to achieve and all the amazing things we were going to get. It was maybe a change in how they approach health and well-being, which again for us was interesting to understand, because one of the things organizations said was that a lot of the reason why they focus mainly on awareness raising is because it's seen as a bit of like a quick win. So you can be seen as doing quite a lot if you have, let's say, 10 webinars on mental health or on health and well-being topics. And for some businesses, because again, there is no strategic approach to health and well-being, that is seen as enough. So they're not too worried about what it is achieving, but it's as long as we see, as we're seen as doing things, that might be enough. And all of a sudden getting these 3 companies to say, actually, this might not be the things that we actually want to do, and we might want to focus on bigger things, and we need to carve out time to do these things if this is important for the company, but then also have time to actually reflect and assess and plan and do the most difficult things. So identifying, for example, in one of the organizations, bullying and harassment were identified as problematic. So how do they want to approach it? What are they going to do? Do they need more information to understand how to navigate that? What are the things that they're going to put in place? And this is more of a slow burner. It's not something that's probably going to change from today to tomorrow, but ensuring that they do have the time to think about these bigger things that impact their culture was quite a big one. And it was something that we started the project almost like thinking, this is a given. Yeah, everyone sort of understands this is how we should approach it. And yeah, it was not. So it was really interesting on that side as well.
Yeah, the old activity versus outcomes. Like, it doesn't guarantee activity does not guarantee the outcomes that you want. So no, it's again, you'd think people know that, but there's lots of examples of people not doing it.
Yep.
So you've spoken about some of the main learnings, Joanna, so far, I guess, of doing this project. If you had to summarize, I guess, the top 3 to 5 learnings from this project, what would they be?
So I think senior leadership buy-in is absolutely crucial. And although we did, that was part of the prerequisites to get involved in the project, buy-in can sometimes be almost like a tick in the box as well. It could be, yeah, I do support, but then practically supporting it is very different. Putting the resources in place is very different. So this was on the back of this project. We did the overall project summary report, but then we also created 2 documents, one for senior leaders in terms of what do you need to know given this project, what are the things you need to know and what are the things you need to do. And then we also created one for people who are responsible for leading mental health, whether they have a formal role in that or not. And so some of the things we told people, or some of the highlights of that were, senior leadership definitely needs to be involved. It needs to be involved in a way that means putting resources in place and supporting a strategic approach to it. So seeing the role of senior leaders in that context is quite important. One of the other things that, again, was a big piece of learning was, and this sounds a bit ridiculous, but in the same way that I hope I wouldn't be asked to drive a train, we need to start looking at health and well-being as a specialist area. So it cannot just be anything goes. And I've used this example many times, but in rail, I've worked with people who one day were working in a control room and the next day had a budget for health and well-being. And we cannot keep relying on people that are passionate to do things. We need people that do have the skills. So it is a specialist area. It does require specialist knowledge. So again, it needs to be resourced properly. We cannot consistently be doing basically this over and over again. Then something else that again became quite evident for us was that where resources do not exist, which is the case in many organizations in rail, we might need to look at almost like sharing the load. So, okay, you don't have the resources, you don't have one person allocated to do this or a team allocated to do this. Can you work with different people in your organization to actually establish what your issues are, to actually establish a proper plan and to measure it? So not placing it all under one person, which is something that we have seen in the past. And as I was saying before, it's quite counterproductive, isn't it? If we're trying to improve mental health or health and well-being, if you want, and then you have one person that is being completely burnt out by trying to do their job plus something else, that something is definitely not right there. So I think these were probably the key things. So really making sure health and well-being is appropriately resourced, having a strategic plan for it, having the right people with the right capability. And again, it might be that someone is coming from an operational role in rail and is interested in health and well-being, but then they do need the support and the training to develop skills in that area. It cannot just be off you go, start delivering things, because it doesn't work like that. We realized, for example, that things that for us were a given, as in what does pre and post measures mean, were not a given for some people. They didn't understand what we meant by that. And this is in no way trying to shame them, but it's just a reflection that it is really hard to move things without the proper knowledge, or at least like some baseline knowledge to understand what is health and well-being, what we talk about when we talk about health and well-being in the workplace, or mental health in the workplace. How do we measure? So again, if we're asking people to assess, understand your organization, what does that look like? Is something that you need some baseline knowledge to even be able to understand what to assess. When you talk about creating strategies, what does that mean? Because in our mind, it was quite obvious, but it is not. So yeah, the capability bit is quite a big one. I think it is really hard to move things along without ensuring we have at least some baseline understanding of these things, really.
Yeah, I think those findings are very much broadly applicable, right, across countries, across the different types of initiatives that companies might have. So, yeah, no, I think our listeners will write all those ones down.
Um, so what are you doing next with this project, or with the work that you've sort of developed as a result of the project?
So there are a few things that are coming up. Directly linked to the project are a couple of other research projects. So we are currently developing one on barriers for senior leadership, prioritization of health and well-being. So on the back of this, it was something that we already knew, but it was reiterated to us that without senior leaders actually being fully involved and committed, it's really hard to move things along. So one of my colleagues, Deborah, is currently working with the industry to interview a variety of people in senior leadership positions to understand things such as, what do they understand about health and well-being? When they think about health and well-being, what does that mean to them? What do they see their role in health and well-being? Do they understand the strategies or the plans that exist in the organization for health and well-being? To what extent are they supporting them? So quite an exploratory piece to try to start to unpick more in detail some of the barriers in terms of senior leadership. So one of the things we realized at RSSB was we were talking about the role of senior leaders, but then in practice, when it comes to senior leaders in rail, we didn't fully understand what the issues were. So we were sort of assuming a variety, it's because of this, or it's because of that. So we really want to explore that. So that is a piece that is going on at the moment. And then a second one is actually around exploring ways to improve capability in the people that are in health and well-being positions. So ideally, people would have health and well-being background. They would come from their education would be in health and well-being. The reality is we have many people in these roles, or formally or informally in these roles, that do not have them, but they are in these roles. So how can we support them to develop these baseline skills? So we're talking about, again, basic health and well-being understanding, especially when it comes to workplace health and well-being, and what might be risk factors for well-being in the workplace, but then also research skills, really. So what do we mean by research? What do we mean by assessment? What do we mean by monitoring? Being able to recognize evidence and understand where to look for evidence. So your Instagram might not be the place where you would look for evidence on a health and well-being topic. So how can they identify things that work and make those decisions? So we're currently exploring how RSSB can support the industry in developing people that are already in these roles to ensure that they have what they need to really lead the way in terms of improving mental health, but health and well-being more holistically.
Yeah. So yeah, getting leaders across the principles, I guess, is something that we need to do fairly often. And I think especially when we're talking about mental health, there's still this really strong perception that mental health exists inside people's brains, and helping leaders to make the connection between, work as a determinant of mental health can be a big a big challenge to get past. So that's definitely consistent with kind of what we see as a really important lever. And then, the capability build of their kind of internal people who are going to need to be driving and maintaining the work is the other area of focus for us around supporting this type of work. So good to see that our processes are aligned with what you've been finding as well.
Yeah. And I think on that note, it made me think about something I haven't mentioned, but that we're wanting to do again. So as I mentioned, we did this mental health survey back in 2020. We want to repeat it this year. We want to understand to what extent things actually moved from where we were in 2020. And again, we have the Rail Mental Health Charter. We have had this project, the outcomes of this project coming out. A variety of things have been supported in the rail industry, but are we do we really see any changes in terms of for example, how people feel, how rail workers feel? So that's something we're wanting to do this year as well, repeat the mental health survey, and again, take the temperature again and try to understand where we are.
That's no, I really love. Obviously, the reason we asked you on, Joanna, was because from afar the research and the project looked really good, and so really interesting. I guess the findings and I guess the differences between the planned project and then like the outcomes that you got just by getting in there and doing it. Really great to see. But as someone who absolutely loves this podcast, I do remember she said this was her favorite podcast by far compared to anything else that's available. Um, you would know the question I'm going to ask you because we ask it to all of our guests. So, if you had to think about the future, what would the future of workplace mental health look like for you?
So I think picking up on what Joelle has mentioned, I really hope we can start to see mental health and health more generically and safety as two sides of the same coin. So I think sometimes it's almost like, oh, it's one or the other. We cannot focus too much on health and well-being. We need to focus on, and actually, I cannot see them as separate. So that's my dream, is that we start understanding these things as two concepts that influence each other. We cannot have good health if people are working in environments that are quite problematic for them, and we cannot really have proper safety if people are not well, and if people don't feel safe to raise issues that they have identified, if people are struggling at work consistently and are dealing with a variety of work-related issues. So that is my dream, is to really get health and safety aligned and working together, one to support each other.
Yeah, terrific. That would be great.
It would be great. To be fair, I do see some organisations that are already doing that very well, so we'll give them their props. But yeah, more consistency would be good. Last question for you today. Do you have words of advice for listeners who want to work in the field of psych health and safety?
Well, I don't know if it's words of advice necessarily, but what I would say is it is a wonderful area if you like a challenge. So it is, there's still a lot to do, which is quite exciting. But one thing that I have come to realize is, as a psychologist, probably more than as a psychologist, as a person, the way I see things is typically, quite in a quite analytical way. So if someone presents me with a really great rationale, even if it goes against what makes sense to me, willing to consider it. So in my mind, I always felt that if you have good data and you present it, then things are going to change. It's a bit more complicated than that. So not everyone is necessarily moved by the great data you might have. So one thing that I've come to understand is that developing skills around influencing, developing the way in which you communicate, whatever outcomes you have, being able to explain yourself in a clear way to different people, different audiences, is quite a big one. It's not necessarily something that I think we reflect on too much. So if you are wanting to come in and work in this area, there's probably quite a lot of pushing and influencing and to do, which is not necessarily something that you might anticipate. And then, of course, in addition to this, if you're wanting to work in psychological health and safety, make sure you actually have the capability to do that. So make sure you keep developing yourself, make sure your background is sound. And again, for example, in my case, I always use this example. I did not study to become an occupational psychologist. My experience was clinical, was forensic. I have had to do a lot of work to understand the workplace, and I'm still developing, and there's still huge things I don't know. So being able also to recognize boundaries where you may be stepping into an area you don't really understand and asking for help and using consultancy with other people can be a really good one. So really make sure you develop yourself, you have a strong background, and I don't think it is something that you can you can sit down and like, okay, I know all I need to know about psychological health and safety. So I'm set. No, you need to keep on developing yourself and engaging with people that know more than you and challenging your thoughts and refreshing. So so I don't know if this is great advice, but definitely my experience, these things are quite important.
I would classify that as great advice.
I think it's amazing advice.
Yeah, and not just for psych health and safety either, but probably for most professions, important to know where the limits are and adopt that lifelong learning approach.
Yeah, but I think particularly in this area of psychology and I guess occupational health and safety, what we understand good practice to be in psychological safety or psychosocial safety is just rapidly developing all the time. So you have to be a lifelong learner and be willing, as I think you mentioned before, Joanna, if you are presented with different ideas, to change your mindset and go, oh, okay, like I've got data now that actually supports something different to what I actually believed before, right? So be willing to challenge yourself and, like you say, surround yourself with other people who know more than you do, or maybe know more about a different aspect than what you do.
Yeah, or people that can challenge you. So they might not even. So one of the things I find the most refreshing is when we have new team members come to RSSB, because sometimes, as much as you want, you can basically start looking like this, and then you have a new member who says, "But why do we do it?" Or "But why is that?" Or is able creating an environment where you can be challenged is awesome, because it means people are helping you see things through different perspectives. You can, again, sometimes you are challenged, but still, upon reflection, it's, what I said still makes sense, or this particular concept still makes sense. But in other occasions, it's so nice when you find your blind spots and you're just like, oh yeah, I didn't think about it like that. So it's, I think being willing to be challenging yourself where you can, but being open to others doing it to yourself as well, I think is a really important one if you want to develop continuously, and if you don't want just to be stuck and obsolete at some point. So
Well, look, Joanna, that brings us to the end of this episode. It's been a really great conversation with you. I'm glad we finally got it done. It has taken a while to schedule this one in, but amazing work that you and the RSSB group are doing, as well as, through the Railway Mental Health Charter as well. So kudos to you, and we look forward to hearing what's next down the track.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Oh, that was a pun that I threw in there without even trying.
Down the track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. So listeners, on that bombshell, that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember, we do record these over video when we have our guests on, so you can catch all of those videos on the Flourish GX YouTube channel. We also take snippets, the best of the best bits of these episodes, and we put them on the Flourish GX LinkedIn page. So follow along there, and while you're over there, connect with myself and Joelle if you want to continue the conversation. But that's it for today. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.